Jackson sat alone in his dim office, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. The coffee on his desk had gone cold hours ago, but he still sipped it absent-mindedly, eyes glued to the grainy black and white security footage. There, in the corner of the frame, a young man, wiry, almost fragile, stood near the pastry shelf. A hoodie cloaked his frame, zipped tight like armor against the world. He darted glances left and right, fingers twitching with uncertainty. Then, in one swift and practiced move, he slipped something into his jacket, a sandwich, a small act, yet it cracked the air with tension. Just a few feet away, Meera was restocking cups. She looked up at that exact moment. Her eyes met the boy's. She paused, breath catching, then turned back to her task without a word. No alarm, no confrontation, just silence. A silence that said everything. Jackson froze the frame, his jaw tightened, lips pressed into a hard line. He rewound the footage, this time slower, as if searching for meaning in the subtleties. The same sequence played out again, the quiet theft, the silent witness, the mutual avoidance. Leaning back in his chair, he muttered under his breath, almost as if speaking to ghosts. "I thought he was just another thief. But then," he said something I can't forget. He hit pause, the image stilled on the boy's face, eyes tired beyond his years, lips drawn tight, a hunger far deeper than physical. Jackson didn't know it yet, but that moment, small, forgettable to anyone else, was about to pull at the very threads of his beliefs about kindness, about dignity, about what it really means to give. For 2 decades, Jackson Rivers had built his café empire from the ground up. No legacy, no investors, just grit, sleepless nights, and an almost ruthless will to survive. At 23, he was hustling lattes from a pushcart near the train station. Now, at 43, he owned 7 bustling cafes scattered across the city like chess pieces. Success had taught him discipline, structure, rules that kept chaos at bay. He lived by a code: work hard, earn trust, and only give second chances when they were deserved. Over time, though, something inside him calcified. The more he gave, the more people took. Gratitude faded into expectation, and generosity turned into vulnerability. So he stopped giving. He focused on metrics, not faces. Loyalty became a number on a spreadsheet. He wasn't unkind, just exact. Once, in a staff meeting, he'd said, "I don't run a church, I run a business." The words weren't cold, just matter of fact. His staff respected him. Some feared him. None really knew him. And maybe that's how he preferred it. Until that quiet morning, when a kid in a hoodie took a sandwich and cracked something inside him wide open. It wasn't that Jackson lacked compassion. He'd had it once. Years ago, he advanced rent money to a struggling barista. The next day, both the guy and the cash register key disappeared. Since then, Jackson didn't trust stories. He trusted systems. He installed cameras in every corner, not to catch criminals, but to catch cracks, weakness, sentimentality, tiny fractures in the wall that, if left unchecked, would spread. To him, giving without accountability was dangerous. An extra cookie here, a free coffee there. It all seemed harmless, but it chipped away at the foundation. Every act of unchecked kindness was a risk, and risk, to Jackson, meant failure waiting to happen. So when he saw Meera turn away, his internal alarm blared. Meera had been with the cafe for nearly 4 years. She wasn't the fastest, not the most efficient, but customers loved her. Her warmth, the sincerity in her voice when she asked, "How's your day really going?" She didn't just serve coffee. She served connection. Jackson had noticed, never late, always composed, but lately something had shifted. Inventory reports whispered of 1 or 2 missing sandwiches a week, not enough to raise red flags, just enough to hide. Jackson turned to the cameras. There, late at night, Meera, always alone on the shift, would wrap a sandwich and quietly set it in a paper bag by the back counter. No charge, no label. She didn't eat it, didn't hand it to anyone. She just left it there. Same night, same hour, like a ritual. Jackson didn't know who it was for, but he was beginning to understand why. He didn't confront her. Not yet. He believed in quiet pressure, in timing. The truth had a way of unraveling itself when left undisturbed. But this didn't feel accidental. Meera was too deliberate, too careful. These weren't mistakes, they were choices. One more clip. Meera, sandwich in hand, placing it by the sink. 10 minutes later it vanished. No sale, no receipt. Jackson rewound, frame by frame. A figure emerged from the shadows in the back hallway, the same boy, hoodie up, eyes darting. He slipped the sandwich into his coat like he'd done it before. Meera looked right at him and turned away. Jackson sat back, whispered to the silence, "So, she knows." He didn't know the boy's name, or his story, or why Meera protected him, but Jackson had seen enough. He formed a plan, quiet, strategic. He'd catch them both. Then he'd decide what to do. The bell over the cafe door chimed, delicate and familiar. A figure stepped inside, shoulders curled inward, hoodie faded and threadbare. His sneakers flattened at the soles, one of them flapping with each step like a loose tongue. He moved with the caution of someone who'd been invisible for too long. At the counter, he fished out a crumpled handful of coins and bills. Counted again. "Small black coffee, please," he said softly. Meera nodded, her face neutral. No questions, no judgment. As the espresso machine hissed to life, she reached into the pastry case, pulled out a cheese sandwich, wrapped it in paper, and placed it gently beside the cup. The boy blinked, confused. I didn't." "It was extra," she said, her voice calm and firm. He hesitated, then gave a single nod. "Thank you," he murmured. There was something in his voice, gravel mixed with vulnerability, a tightness that spoke of pride eroded by need. Jackson watched from his shadowed corner, unseen. He'd found the boy from the footage. Now, all that remained was the question that gnawed at him. Why Meera kept feeding him. And what this kid, with the worn-out shoes and quiet desperation, was hiding from. Later that day, Jackson asked the staff, casually, almost carelessly, "Hey, any of you know that kid who comes in sometimes? Hoodie, real quiet." What he was really asking was something else entirely. "Do you know him?" Jackson asked, wiping down the countertop beside Meera, his voice smooth with practiced casualness. One barista shrugged. "He comes in sometimes, always polite, doesn't say much." Another chimed in. "Clean kid, quiet, never makes a fuss. Thought maybe he worked nearby?" They exchanged uncertain glances. No one really knew. "No name?" Jackson asked, trying to sound offhanded. Meera paused, then answered softly. "I think he told me once. Eli." Jackson nodded like it meant nothing. But it did. It unsettled him, this nameless presence in a place where regulars were more like family, where coffee orders came with nicknames and weekends came with inside jokes. Eli didn't belong to any of that. He was a shadow, slipping in, slipping out, leaving no trace except for one missing sandwich and a growing knot in Jackson's gut. He opened the notes app on his phone. Eli. Hoodie. Quiet. Watch more. There was something off, something that didn't add up, and Jackson couldn't ignore the feeling crawling under his skin. That night, alone in the dark office again, the only light came from his glowing screen. He pored over security footage from the past 2 weeks, one clip at a time, same night, same quiet choreography. Eli entered through the side door, hovered near the counter. Meera disappeared into the back. Eli glanced around, quick but not panicked. He reached over, lifted a sandwich, tucked it beneath his coat, and walked out without saying a word. Seconds later, Meera returned. She looked at the empty tray, hesitated, then let out the faintest sigh before turning back to her task. She didn't check the register, didn't scan the room, just resumed working, like nothing had happened. Jackson played it again and again. Each time his chest tightened. This wasn't forgetfulness, it was intent, and worse, it was quiet cooperation. She saw him, and she let it happen. To Jackson, silence wasn't just a passive act, it was participation. It was the same as lying. And now, both of them, Eli and Meera, had broken the one thing he thought held his world together: control. His jaw clenched as he shut the laptop. This wasn't compassion, this was chaos, disguised in good intentions. Jackson had spent years shaping his cafes like machines, everything measured, every detail deliberate. A misplaced dollar wasn't just a financial slip, it was a failure in the system. Now, one of his most trusted employees was feeding a stranger behind his back. And not just feeding, protecting. But Jackson didn't want an apology. He didn't want a tearful confession. He wanted truth, real, raw, unfiltered. And he knew he wouldn't get that through a screen. So he made a plan. No blazer, no watch, just an old hoodie, worn jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. The next day, he'd walk into his own cafe like any other customer, blend in, sit quietly, watch, listen, and finally meet the boy behind the footage. The morning air was crisp when Jackson stepped through the doors, nearly unrecognizable. No staff gave him a second glance. He chose a seat by the window, just 2 spots from Eli. The boy was already there, fingers wrapped tight around a chipped paper cup, like he needed the warmth more than the caffeine. His sneakers were held together with tape, jacket worn thin at the sleeves. He sat still, not scrolling his phone, not twitching or shifting, just breathing, like someone who had forgotten what stillness felt like. Jackson watched with studied calm. When Meera quietly placed a pastry beside Eli's cup, he startled, then gave her a small nod. She didn't say a word, just smiled and walked away. Jackson sipped his coffee. This didn't feel like theft, it felt like ritual, like quiet survival. But he still needed answers. He leaned forward slightly. "Busy day ahead?" he asked, voice light. Eli looked over, wariness flickering across his face. His shoulders tensed, then relaxed, just a little. "Just the usual," he said, guarded but polite. Jackson nodded. "This place has good coffee." Eli gave a soft smile. "Yeah, and it's quiet." The words hung there. Jackson could feel the weight in their simplicity. Eli wasn't talking about noise. "You come here often?" Jackson asked. "A couple times a week," Eli replied. "Better than sitting in a parking lot?" Jackson let that settle. He didn't push. There was something in the boy's posture, half defensive, half exhausted. Not afraid, just weathered. Like someone who had learned to survive unnoticed. "You work nearby?" Jackson tried again. Eli hesitated. His fingers squeezed the cup. "Not really," he said. "Just do things, here and there." Jackson waited, the silence stretching like a held breath. "You got a place around here?" "Yeah." Eli's jaw moved, but nothing came out at first. Then, finally, soft, unadorned, "I live in my car since last fall." Jackson said nothing, just listened. "My mom died a few months ago. Eli added, almost like a footnote, not looking for sympathy, just explaining his place in the world. Their eyes met, and Jackson saw it all in that one glance. Grief not yet softened, a quiet kind of strength that refused to die, and a flicker of something else. Hope, maybe? Or memory? Jackson took a breath. "Can I ask something?" Eli nodded slowly. "Well, this place, of all the cafes, why keep coming back here?" Eli looked out the window, as if the answer lived somewhere just beyond the glass. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know," he said. "It's warm. Quiet. No one looks at me weird." He paused, then added something that hit like thunder. "It feels safe here." Jackson didn't know what to say. He had never designed his cafes to be safe. He built them to be efficient, reliable, profitable. And yet, somehow, despite everything, this space had become a haven for someone who had nowhere else to go. Eli ran his thumb along the rim of the cup. "There was a day," he began. Jackson didn't move. "I hadn't eaten in 2 days. Came in, waited until no one was looking, took a sandwich. I thought they'd throw me out." He chuckled dryly. Not humor, just survival. "But she saw me. Meera. She didn't yell, didn't shame me. She just came back with another sandwich and a drink." Jackson's chest tightened. No guilt trip, no speech, just kindness. He paused, gathering something in the silence. "Most people, when they look at you, they've already decided who you are, what you've done, what you deserve." He tapped the table once, quietly. "I've been followed in stores, told to leave restaurants, doors closed before I even got near them." Jackson didn't interrupt. "But Meera, she saw me take something I didn't pay for, and she still looked at me like I was a person, like I hadn't failed." His voice dropped even lower. "I've never been trusted like that before." And that was it. No dramatic ending, just the raw, honest truth. And for the first time in a very long time, Jackson didn't know what to say. He didn't feel angry or betrayed. He just felt human. Jackson stared into his cup, the silence between them louder than the hum of conversation and clinking mugs around them. His fingers wrapped around the ceramic, motionless, while his thoughts roared louder than any noise in the cafe. All those years he'd lived by rules, structure, order, discipline. Suddenly felt brittle. Not broken, but not whole either. He'd always believed kindness had to be earned, that compassion was currency, and trust had to be paid forward with proof. But Eli hadn't proved anything. He was just hungry. And Meera hadn't needed a reason to act. She'd responded not with suspicion or protocol, but with quiet grace. No clipboard checklists, no questions asked, just a sandwich. Jackson shifted in his chair. Something inside him pushed back, unsettled. This wasn't the outcome he expected. He had come here ready to expose a wrong, to uphold his order, to put an end to something he thought was a violation. But now, sitting across from a quiet young man with grief in his chest and calluses on his hands, certainty began to crack in his mind. No defense, no excuses, just silence. And somehow that silence carried more truth than anything Jackson had heard in years. Then Eli spoke, unprompted, his voice barely cutting through the noise around them. "I was arrested once," he said. 15. Jackson blinked, caught off guard, but didn't speak. "Corner store," Eli continued. "Took a bag of chips, bottle of water. I didn't even run, just stood there." His tone wasn't bitter, just factual, a story he'd had to live with long enough for the edges to go dull. "They asked me why I did it. I said, because I was hungry." He looked down at his hands like they carried the memory, like they still held that bag of chips. I didn't want to steal, I just didn't want to go another day on an empty stomach. Jackson kept his eyes steady, a knot forming in his throat. Eli added, quieter now. They gave me a record. Petty theft. But no one asked if I had food at home. That line sat in Jackson's chest like a weight, and for the first time in his life, he realized he'd never asked that question of anyone either. Eli blinked slowly, his gaze locked on the table. His voice cracked slightly as he whispered, "That day, Meera gave me a sandwich." He swallowed, the memory pressing up like a tide. I was planning to give up. Jackson didn't move. I hadn't eaten in over 30 hours, lost my last job the week before. I was sleeping in my car, with a broken back window. It was freezing. His hands trembled slightly, still clutching the cup. I came in thinking maybe I'd steal something, and that'd be it. No plan after that, just be done. A tear slipped down Eli's cheek, quick and silent. He wiped it fast, almost like it had betrayed him. But she saw me, and she didn't shame me. Didn't even look disappointed, just handed me that sandwich like I was still a person. The air between them thickened, not with tension, but with something quieter, deeper. Jackson felt it inside him, a shift he couldn't stop. Then Meera appeared. She walked over with 2 cups in hand, her steps unhurried, face calm. She didn't give Jackson a second glance, just another customer, hidden behind a cap and an old coat. "Refill?" she asked gently, nodding at Eli, who was already setting his cup down. He nodded, eyes red but clearer. "Thank you," he murmured. She offered a small, understanding smile, the kind that needed no follow-up, and placed the second cup by Jackson. She didn't say a word, just nodded politely, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and walked away. There was no tension, no panic, just presence, as if kindness here was just another part of the routine. For a moment, it felt like nothing bad had ever touched this space. Jackson leaned back, eyes following her. She still had no idea who he really was, but somehow in that moment, he finally understood exactly who she was. He turned to Eli, really looked at him, then slowly, deliberately, he stood. He reached up and pulled off his cap, placing it gently on the table. "My name's Jackson Rivers," he said quietly. "I own this café." Meera froze mid-step behind the counter. The barista at the register went wide-eyed. The couple at the corner table paused, cups halfway to their lips. Eli looked up, pale and startled. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The espresso machine hissed like white noise. No one moved. No one breathed. Jackson didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I've been listening," he said, eyes fixed on Eli. Eli's hands gripped the cup tighter, his breath caught. Meera looked stunned, her face flickering between fear and something softer. Was it guilt, or was it pride? Jackson didn't move. And he hadn't rehearsed what came next, because nothing he used to believe quite fit anymore. Meera stood frozen, a cleaning cloth limp in her hand. Her eyes met his, then fell. She didn't speak. Eli half stood, panicked. I'm sorry," he stammered. "I didn't mean, I just—" Jackson raised a hand, calm but firm. "Sit." The word was gentle, but it carried weight. Eli sank back down, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast. Jackson turned to the counter. Staff meeting now. Confused looks passed between the few employees on shift. Whispers, nervous glances, but they obeyed. They clustered near the back, behind the espresso machine. No warning, no schedule, just the boss, without his usual armor, calling them together in the middle of a quiet Tuesday morning. Meera was last to join, still silent, but her chin lifted slightly. Jackson looked at them, at the faces he'd worked beside but never truly seen. This wasn't about a sandwich. Not anymore. This was about everything, about what kind of place he'd built, and the kind of man he had become. He met Meera's gaze. "You saw him take food," he said, voice measured. "Why didn't you report it?" Meera didn't flinch. Her eyes were tired but steady. "Because he didn't steal it," she said simply. Jackson's tone sharpened. "He didn't pay for it." "No," she replied, "but he was starving." A ripple of tension passed through the room. Jackson folded his arms. "That's not how we run things." Meera didn't look away. "Then maybe we need to ask why." Her words hung in the air like smoke. "I didn't ignore it," she added, voice quieter now. "I made a choice. Because I believed what he needed wasn't punishment. It was help." The room fell still. No interruptions, no defenses, just faces, young and old, watching him, waiting. And for the first time, Jackson saw the café not as a machine, but as a living thing, a place where lives touched, where choices mattered. Then a younger barista, Nena, broke the silence. "I get the compassion," she said. Her voice was hesitant, thoughtful. "But isn't that just enabling theft?" Meera turned toward her. "It wasn't about the food." Nena frowned. "Still, if anyone else saw it, what would they think? That it's okay to just take what you need? No rules, no questions?" The tension began to stir again. Jackson stood in the center of it all, caught between the old world he built and a new one beginning to bloom in front of him. Silence lingered like smoke in the air, thick and unmoving. Even Jackson, usually the first to speak in moments like this, said nothing. Nene's words still echoed quietly. "We all work hard. We follow rules. If those don't matter anymore, what are we doing?" Meera looked down, her fingers folding together over her apron like she was holding something fragile. Herself, maybe. "I hear you," she said softly, the words carrying not defensiveness, but understanding. Jackson's gaze moved between the two women. There it was, clear as day. The line. One side held structure, order, and policy. The other side, mercy, human need, and empathy. And now he stood squarely on that line, uncertain which way to lean. Meera took a small step forward. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't tremble. It simply arrived. "If helping someone when they're at their lowest means I broke a rule," she said, "then I'll accept whatever comes next." The air stilled. She turned, not just to Jackson, but to the entire room. "I didn't do it to feel good. I didn't do it to be a hero." Her eyes shone, not with pride, but with something firmer. Conviction. Memory. "I did it because I'd been that hungry before, not for food, but for someone to see me, to look at me like I still mattered, even if it was just for a moment." The quiet deepened. Even Nena had no retort this time. Meera didn't raise her hands in defense. She simply stood there, rooted in the truth of her choice, prepared to accept whatever came. "I won't defend the act," she said, "but I'll stand by the reason." And with those words, something shifted, not just in Jackson, but in the atmosphere itself. The conversation had transcended rules and broken policies. It had become something else, something sacred. Jackson stood in the eye of that emotional storm, arms folded, jaw clenched, mind racing. Meera's voice echoed in his head. Nena's concerns lingered too. Both were valid, both painfully human. He glanced at Eli, still seated, head low, hands knotted tightly around his cup. There was shame there, but also patience, as if he expected this moment to end the way it always had before. For people like him. This was Jackson's café, his team, his vision, his rules, and for the first time he realized he didn't know what justice looked like anymore. Not really. The seconds passed like thunder rumbling in the distance, each one louder in silence. Then, without warning, Jackson turned. He walked slowly toward the kitchen door, each step a silent sentence. "Meeting's over," he said quietly. No lecture, no punishment, no dramatic gesture, just an end. The staff slowly dispersed. Some glanced at each other, some didn't. Meera remained still. Her breathing was slow and steady. Eli stayed seated, unmoving, as if afraid even hope could break the moment. Jackson kept walking, deeper into the back, past the kitchen, toward the place he hadn't visited in a long time, not physically and not emotionally. "Feels like there might be more," he muttered. "Like there's..." That night, long after the cafe lights dimmed and the doors were locked, he remained. The hum of the fridge was constant now. The clock on the wall ticked with an almost rhythmic taunt. He found himself standing near the old suggestion box. Dusty, forgotten, tucked beside a mop closet, more relic than resource. He opened it, not knowing what he was looking for, just searching. He took notes. Inside, napkins with scribbled notes, a few old comment cards, torn receipts with lipstick kisses. At the bottom, folded carefully, was a single envelope. No stamp, no name, just shaky handwriting. Looking up, Kate. He opened it. "To whoever was working that rainy afternoon, you gave me a sandwich. No questions, no judgment. I hadn't eaten in 3 days. I was thinking of ending it that night. But you looked me in the eye like I still mattered. Thank you. I'm still here." Jackson sat down, the note trembling slightly in his hands. He didn't know who wrote it, or who gave the sandwich. But suddenly, Meera's act didn't feel like insubordination. It felt like salvation. Sleep never came that night. He kept the letter in his pocket, close to his chest, warm from his palm. He walked for hours. No goal, just motion. He drifted into old neighborhoods, the streets of his past, each step peeling back years. The alley behind the pharmacy, where he once curled under a blanket he didn't own. The bus bench at 3rd and Main, where he spent hours pretending someone was coming for him. The corner store with the flickering neon sign where a clerk gave him bread without a receipt. He had forgotten how cold pavement felt on your back, forgotten what it meant to not belong anywhere, to exist in the margins. Back then, no one knew his name. Now everyone did. But tonight he felt like that boy again. The one who once needed grace, more than rules. He stopped outside a small, aging deli. The windows were clouded now, but the memory behind them was crisp. He'd been 17. Cold, hollow. He placed a single bread roll on the counter, came up 37 cents short. The clerk reached to take it back. Then, without a word, a hand beside his dropped the change. An older man. Worn coat, quiet eyes. "Keep the bread, kid." No speech, no lecture, just help. Jackson ate that roll sitting on the curb, the steam rising into the cold air. And the taste had stayed. Not because it was fresh, but because it was given. And now, all these years later, he saw the full circle. He had been Eli once, and someone had chosen grace for him too. He stood in the soft light of early dawn, hands deep in his coat pockets. Wind blew, soft and sharp, and the streets lay quiet around him. How did I forget? He asked himself. Not the hunger. The hand. He had built a life to never need help again. But maybe the real strength wasn't in avoiding need. Maybe it was in remembering the cost of being forgotten. For the first time in years, he felt human again. The next morning, Jackson arrived at the cafe early. No clipboard, no latte, no suit, just a folded letter in his palm and eyes that had seen something new. Or perhaps something old. By 9 o'clock IEM the staff gathered, half curious, half nervous. Jackson stood beside the counter, cleared his throat. "Starting today," he said, "this cafe will have a shelf by the door." He held up the letter. "It's called the community shelf. If someone needs food, they take it, no questions, no shame." The room stilled. He looked at every face, each one different, each one now part of something larger than policy. "We'll call it what it is, Grace, and we'll run it with the same pride we run everything else." There was a pause, not hesitation but reverence. He continued, "Whoever can give, gives. Whoever needs, takes, and no one asks why." This wasn't a change in business. This was a change in belief. A murmur rippled through the staff, a few furrowed brows, a few glances traded. "But what if people take advantage?" one voice asked, unsure. Another added, "What if it gets out of control? We're not a shelter, we're a cafe." Jackson smiled, not with defiance, but with understanding. And what he said next would answer them all. Jackson listened without flinching. He nodded once, then stepped forward, his voice clear and steady, not as a boss, but as a man who had wrestled with his own rules. "I know the risks," he said. "I know this isn't perfect. I know someone, somewhere, will say we're being too soft." He let the words breathe in the silence. "But ask yourself, what are we really afraid of? A few sandwiches?" He paused, then added with quiet weight, "or losing control?" No one answered. They didn't need to. The question wasn't meant for response. It was meant to shift something in their hearts. Jackson looked around the room. "You can choose the clean ledger, the no surprises policy, the business model that keeps everyone safe on paper." He drew a breath, let it settle in the still air. "Or you can choose people." Another pause, one that stretched, not from resistance, but from minds moving slowly, like tectonic plates finally giving way to change. "You can't lead with both," he said, not accusing, just real. "Pick one." Silence followed. Meera stood still, eyes shimmering. She didn't bother to hide the tear that slipped down her cheek. She wiped it gently with the edge of her sleeve, but her chin trembled. Not with shame, but with something deeper. Maybe it was relief. Maybe it was being seen. Jackson caught her gaze and simply nodded. Then, one by one, like small flames catching light, team members stepped forward. "I'm in," said a voice from the left. "We'll figure it out," another added. "Together." But not everyone stayed. Two baristas quietly gathered their things. No tantrum, no accusations, just a decision made in silence. Jackson didn't stop them. No guilt, no farewell speech. Every team, he thought, chooses its own heart. And as the door closed behind the last of them, Meera whispered, "Thank you." Jackson looked around the smaller room, now filled with fewer people, but stronger roots. For the first time in a long while, it felt like they weren't just working a shift. They were building something. Something that might actually outlast them. Later that day, Jackson spotted Eli sitting near the back window in his usual corner. Same hoodie, same posture, quiet, waiting, but not for anyone. Jackson walked over, sat across from him without invitation. Eli looked up, wary, bracing for bad news. Jackson didn't waste time. "I'm not here to apologize," he said. Eli nodded, quietly preparing for the door to close. "I still don't agree with how it all happened," Jackson continued. A beat passed. "But I owe you something." Jackson let that land. A chance. Eli blinked. What do you mean? I'm offering you a job, Jackson said. Just a few shifts, learn the ropes, no pressure. See if this place can be more than a pit stop between hard days. Eli didn't speak. Who's? Me, finally whispered. Jackson's answer came without hesitation. Because you matter, and because I'm learning that sometimes grace is earned later. Eli looked away. I can't, he said, voice catching. I stole. From you. From this place. I don't deserve to wear your uniform. Jackson leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes steady. You're wrong. You were hungry, desperate. You made a choice. Eli shook his head. Jackson's voice softened. We've all done things we're not proud of. Some of us got caught. Some didn't. He paused, then said quietly, no one in this room is without mistakes. Not even me. Eli looked up slowly. His eyes held something fragile, like belief on the edge of being reborn. I don't want charity. This isn't charity, Jackson said. It's trust. Another silence. This one different. Heavier. Not with shame, but with possibility. The door's open, Jackson said gently. What you do with it, that's yours. Eli didn't answer, but something inside him shifted. You could almost hear it, like a door cracking open on old hinges. The next morning, Eli showed up early. He wore a clean shirt, same duct-taped shoes. His hands trembled as he tied the apron Jackson handed him. Meera greeted him with a smile that asked nothing, said everything. By noon, he'd wiped down tables, restocked napkins, refilled the creamers twice, quiet but not invisible anymore. Customers noticed the new face, but no one questioned him. Maybe that was the best part. By the front door, next to the hours of operation, a new sign had appeared. Clear, unapologetic. Here, you don't just buy coffee. You find your way back to people. Some customers paused to read it. One smiled, another wiped her eyes and walked in. Behind the counter, Eli stood a little tall. A week passed. He was still learning. His lattes had too much foam. His cappuccinos were uneven. He spilled milk across the counter more than once. But he never complained. He wiped every surface like it mattered, restocked without being asked, thanked people even when no one was listening. And people noticed. An older man scribbled a note on a napkin. The new guy's got heart. Keep him. A mother with 2 kids waved on her way out. Tell him the hot chocolate was perfect, she said, even though it wasn't. Eli smiled, quiet but lighter. Meera showed him how to hold the pitcher, how to listen for the steam wand's song. Every mistake was followed by a quiet reset. Not because he had to, but because he believed he could do better this time. One slow afternoon, Meera called him over. This grinder's touchy, she said. Too fine it clogs, too coarse it tastes like water. He nodded, focused. She showed him once, then stepped back. Your turn. He hesitated, then adjusted the dial, mimicking her movements. The grinder stuttered. He tried again. Better, she said. Someone taught you? Eli asked. Meera smiled. Yeah, a long time ago. Someone patient, someone kind. She looked at him for a second longer than usual. Guess it's my turn now. Eli smiled. Just a little. But it was real. After his shift, he walked over to the new community shelf. In his hands were 2 sandwiches, paid for with his own tips. No one asked him to. He placed them neatly on the shelf, then reached into his apron and pulled out a small, handwritten note. If you need one, take it. If you have enough, leave one. No name, just a gesture. He stepped back, looked at it quietly, then returned to wiping down tables like it was any other day. Meera noticed, said nothing, just smiled as he passed. For the first time, Ely wasn't just receiving kindness, he was passing it forward. And that changed everything. The bell over the door jingled softly. A small boy stepped in, maybe 10, hoodie too big, shoes too thin. He didn't go to the counter. He walked straight to the shelf, read the note, looked around, unsure. Ely saw him, said nothing, didn't move. The boy picked up a sandwich gently, like it might vanish. He looked toward Ely. Ely gave a small nod, a smile. The boy returned it, then slipped out quietly. No words were spoken, none were needed. Ely stood there for a beat longer, then returned to his station. Because he knew that feeling. And today, he made sure someone else wouldn't carry it alone. Jackson watched from the window, the café moving around him like a gentle tide. Meera handed a drink to a regular. Ely wiped a counter, nodded to a stranger. 2 sandwiches rested on the shelf. Jackson's voice came soft, more thought than speech. I used to think I was here to lead, to teach, to keep it all in order. He paused. But Ellie and Meera, they taught me how to be human again. He smiled faintly, eyes never leaving the cafe floor. Sometimes the biggest shift isn't in the rules, it's in the heart. Deep breath. Thanks for sharing this moment with me. If this story moved you, subscribe, share it. Remind someone they still matter. A beat. Because sometimes all it takes is one moment to remind us who we really are.